Barry, good morning. I'm so excited to have you with us this morning. This is Future Forward by Plaza Bridge Group, and I'm Teresa Spangler, CEO of Plaza Bridge Group, and I'm thrilled to introduce to you this morning Barry Harlam, who has an incredible background, inspirational to all of us, and I'm excited for you to share your journey. But you are a board member to so many different boards. So you've accomplished a lot of things that I know a lot of women, in particular in diverse, cultures want to achieve. You've also been a professor at some of the most elite universities in the country. You have an expertise in marketing and customer experience and have pioneered a lot of those activities in your career. And so I'm just excited for you to share your journey. Most importantly, you have this Trouble for Good, your Trouble Inc., which I'm very excited to learn more about and share with people that'll be watching our video this morning. So Barry, I'm gonna just ask you to kick off. I love to hear stories about really a little bit about your journey and what has inspired you to get to where you are today and the things that you're doing today.
Well, terrific. It's great to be here with you, Teresa. Thank you for having me and the chance to have a conversation with you today. And it really is relevant as it relates to trouble, as you already mentioned. TroubleMakers.org is the name of our organization. And I've had the benefit of being inspired by and been in situations where I can inspire people around me. And I think all of us have, right? The chance to be in the world at the time that I came into the professional environments was, of course, on the shoulders of folks that came before all of us, that paved the way to create the situation that we all experience. And all of us live in a moment in time where we have the opportunity to be in situations that would have otherwise not been available to us if we had been born years before. And I think that comes along with an incredible responsibility to create what we want to see for the folks that are coming after us, and hold the tension of the emotions that really are central to how I think, how I wake up every day, and of course have been relevant in a lot of the worlds that I've been in, which is that we've come a long way. We've made a lot of steps forward, and that's worth celebrating and worth being inspired by, to your question. And it's also true that we have a long way to go, and we haven't made progress quickly enough. And certainly we've experienced in very recent days steps back in ways that are fundamental and material. And so that tension around recognizing that I've been advantaged by a lot of courageous people that came before me, that opened doors and windows and paths that would have never been there. And then also realizing that there are still a lot of roads that are closed, and that in order to have something that I believe in, which is equity for all people, all shapes, sizes, genders, races, sectors, that we have a long way to go. And that's one of the goals and fundamental purposes behind Trouble.
Well, we're going to talk more about that. I guess the first question I would have is, to have this such purpose-driven life, which, so many of our peers are really focused in the way that you and I are wanting to make change. Where did it stem from? Who was your most impactful mentor growing up?
Well, my parents actually rise to the top of the list. They, I think I was born in a situation of privilege. We didn't have to worry about food on the table, paying rent, having a place to live, and a lot of core values that were communicated explicitly and implicitly during lots of my life, which was about making sure that, you took advantage of the situation that you were blessed with and fortunate enough to have, and paying it forward and giving back, and recognizing that there are so many people that help you every day: teachers, doctors, nurses, neighbors, friends, family. And sometimes you're on the recipient end of that, and sometimes you're on the giving end of that. And I think that came from a lot of messages and lessons that my parents instilled in me from, day one.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point that change and driving change, sometimes we feel like it's just overwhelming. I talk to young people all the time. It's like, I don't even know where to start. And, it's that single step that you just have to do it. Can you share a little bit about, because you've also worked with so many young people in the university system, what are those tips you tell them about how they could impact change, and not to think so big about it? Because I think the small steps make a difference.
I can't agree more. I mean, I think the small stuff is tangible. It's usually person to person. And I share that. I think it's very important to recognize sort of the systemic situation that we're in, the broad barriers, and think about ways to break them down. And, paragons of that, like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, where you think about
Yeah.
strategies to influence the systems that are at play, are of course really important. And opportunities, as you said, that are right in front of us, that are relational, that are person to person, someone that I can help give advice to and sort through decisions that they're weighing, and maybe bring a perspective that comes along with age, wisdom, and the experiences that I've had, that allow that person to see things in a different way and evaluate them more completely or more comprehensively. And for all of us, the perspectives that we have, no matter how savvy we are and how broad our networks are, they're limited. They're always limited. And so I think the chance to connect with anybody who wants help or needs help and be able to offer that is something that I have been given a lot of opportunities to receive, and I have often and always wanted to take advantage of giving them. And giving them obviously helps another person, but as you're pointing out, it brings so much good feeling and reward to each individual that does it, and that the power of that is immense. If we can all do that and continue to do that, which is part of the spirit of Trouble, that is what drives change. Big changes come from little changes.
Well, you bring up a good point, because one of the reasons I started this, video cast was just to shed some bright light in a dark time. If so many people are hearing darkness, and news is just, awful. And it is, okay. We can't hide that, but where do you find your bright lights in that? And I think Trouble might be a little bit of that for you. Maybe you can share how you keep yourself positive and optimistic, and how does Trouble fit into that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we do lift each other up, and conversations like this, and the conversations that we have as part of Trouble. I mean, one of really the core idea around Trouble is that we honor and recognize troublemakers. Troublemakers are courageous disruptors that make good things happen in the world. And you can make things happen in small ways, from the from the back, from the middle, or in big ways, shouting from the front with loud voices, all sorts of ways to influence and achieve the changes that we're all looking for. And what we do as part of Trouble is similar to this. We have a chance to connect with troublemakers. They're generous enough to hop on a Zoom. We record them and we ask them questions, just like the questions you're asking, Teresa, which is why I loved when we chatted about being able to do this. It's so aligned with everything that we do with Trouble. And those conversations are always uplifting. They are people that are out there generous enough to share their voice, share their thoughts. They do that, you know, in the interview, but they're also doing it every day. And I would say that for all of us and for all of the folks that that are part of your community, as you said, being in a purpose-driven world, I think so much is about what you bring to it. And given all my years of experience in different sectors and different regions, I've had time to reflect on what really matters to me about the work that I do. And the simple summary of that, when I'm, you know, when people are asking for advice, is look to work in environments where you feel like the people you're going to be working with are people that you want to be working with. And there is nothing more important in my mind than that. You could be doing work that is inherently, you know, a mission that is so meaningful. You could be working for an organization that's about solving world hunger. And if you're doing that with a bunch of people that you don't enjoy working with, that you can't learn from, and they can't learn from you, and you can't collaborate and get stuff done, then what satisfaction are you gonna end up getting from that? So I think working in a business where it is aligned with things that you care about, but most importantly, that you're working with people that you know are part of a winning team that you can work with. There's nothing that's more important than that.
So that brings me to, because you sit on, have sat on a number of public and private company boards, and you know, one is a woman. That's awesome, and that should also inspire a lot of women out there, and diverse, you know, folks, that there are opportunities. But talk a little bit about how you evaluate for yourself. Is this the right board for me? Because I think a lot of people jump into thinking that a board seat would be really cool, but we don't always embody the work that really, and the responsibility of that role. Maybe you could share how you evaluated which boards are the right boards for you, and talk about our boards. What are they doing to help impact change?
Yeah, sure, of course. I think, given what I just said, the most important thing in my evaluation process has been to meet with other board members for that particular specific board and ask myself, is this a group of people that I want to be working with? And I'm proud to say that's true for all of the boards that I sit on. It is true that in many situations, you know, a board process will be structured in a way where the nominating and governance committee is the place that interviews and talks with candidates. And that may or may not include a process that's broader with other board members. For every board that I'm on, I've asked to talk to all of the board members before I've made a decision about whether or not it's a good fit for me. And that is because of what we just talked about. Ultimately, you're going to be at the table working with the board. And so you want to know if that's a group of people that you want to work with. The other thing I would say that's really important is, you know, there's a couple of key responsibilities of the board. Obviously, maximizing shareholder value is central to the objective of the board. And in doing so, one of the key responsibilities is hiring and firing the CEO. That's a primary responsibility of every board. So wanting to understand the CEO's leadership, and alignment around that is also very important in terms of being able to evaluate if it's a board that I want to be a part of, a company that I want to be a part of. And the other area that is always front and center is the reputation of the company and the board's responsibility in protecting the reputation of the company. So asking and understanding more about that and how that is perceived, and realities and concerns and risks there is another important area to dig into for due diligence.
Well, so how do you keep, because there's some stressful things about all that. How do you keep yourself in a, I guess, a calming state, if you will? How do you deal with stress or anxiety for a lot of people that are just feeling that right now? What are some of your strategies?
Well, I mean, for me personally, exercise is a really key component to managing my stress. And I am somewhat compulsive about that because it's such a important way for me to have a sense of sanity and centeredness. And so every day starts with exercise. You know, that might mean getting up super early depending on travel and other things, but you know, I started doing that a long time ago, and it really does give me, I think, based on what I've read, some of the benefits that people talk about around meditation and
Sure.
mindfulness. And that is time for me to you know, zone out, reflect on what's going on, sometimes not think about anything, which is sometimes hard for me to do. And so when I'm consumed by exercise, it gives me a break. And that break, I think, fuels a lot of energy
Yeah.
as it relates to my work. But then the other thing I think is, you know, in the work, it's working with people, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that's what most work is. And so developing relationships with the other folks that are around the table, understanding their perspectives, listening, sharing, and of course um, being able to speak up when there are things that are important and may not be proceeding in a way that are consistent with what I think is right, and
Yeah.
then being able to hear responses back and ultimately, you know, learning, listening, and feeling like you're part of making sure that the company's decisions are the ones that are in the best interests of shareholders.
Very good point. And to talk about, I think we're both in WBC. I just talked to Edie yesterday, and
Uh-huh.
her interview will be coming up too. But how important have networks been in your career? And are there some right now that you feel like stand out, that you feel like it would be helpful for others to really seek out maybe?
Yeah, a fabulous question, Teresa, because there are there are many people that I think we all look at and think, that is a good networker. I want to be like that person. They're a good networker. I've never thought of myself as somebody who is a good networker. I'm the person who, you know, rarely goes to conferences. When I go, I always have, you know, my long to-do list. And so when there's a break or an activity at night, I'm back in my room catching up on my email. I'm not a good example to others on building networks. And that being said, you know, I have and continue to work in a way where collaborating with people is something that gives me a lot of energy, and I know that it's important. It's an important ingredient to getting good work done. So I have, you know, I've had moments where I'm changing what I'm doing, or important decisions that are coming up, and I need to think about, oh, who might be somebody that would be good to consult with
Yeah.
as it relates to this issue that the company I'm involved with is dealing with, or a personal thing. And I'm able to always think of people that are good to connect with. So my network is there because of I think an authentic building of it in the work and the experiences that I've had. And I think, you know, the thing to do that's probably most important for me, that wasn't always in my DNA, I think, is that idea of saying, oh, should I pause? Should I take a moment to, you know, maybe this decision is going to take longer to make, but is this one of those decisions where it's, you know, I'm able to add more time? And if so, how do I think about consulting others to get more perspectives that go around it? And then who might those people be? And that seems pretty simple, but sometimes we're all moving really quickly. We want to get stuff off the list. And so we don't take a moment to talk to others. And of course, the right thing to do in some situations, but other situations are important enough and involve this idea of getting a broader perspective that we talked about early on. And so pausing and asking that, and then thinking about who might I consult, I think is so valuable. And for people that are used to running a million miles an hour, that's it. For me, that was advice that I was given early on, and that is really valuable. Just take a moment and ask yourself that question, and you'll be so much better off, because when it's a yes, you're going to take some next steps that you otherwise wouldn't have taken.
Yeah, so that goes to this next question, and it's about imposter syndrome. And I write about it in my book, All That I Am Now That I Know, because I faced it growing up. And, when my first company got venture funding, and the funders, who I was still very close to many, many years later, asked who's going to take the CEO role, I knew he wasn't asking who, he was asking if I was ready to step into it. So can you share if you've ever had that imposter syndrome, and what did you do to work yourself out into the confidence to just step into the roles?
Oh, Teresa, of course, I've never had imposter syndrome. Only, regularly, daily.
Yeah, I know, still, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the thing is that, that we all take for granted some of the stuff that we know, because we know it, and we sort of can assume that other people must too.
Right.
And that, I think, is one of the triggers for me, where imposter syndrome comes from. So I think, that getting over that is usually a moment of, breathing and saying, hey, is there someone else that I think could do this much better? And if so, who is that and why? And most of the time in those situations, there are, of course, other people that I think could do it well. But when I say, am I really qualified, and how does that compare to other people that I might think of, then it gets me out of a mode of doubting all my own capabilities, and being able to step back and say, what are the things that are actually my strengths? What are, and so I think it's like anything, it's being able to move yourself to the space of putting as much weight on the things that are strengths as the things that you might immediately think of as weaknesses. And there are, there are situations, of course, where I might honestly say, you know what, I'm not the best person for that role. It's not because I'm, deficient or not a good person or, anything else. It's just the fit is really important. And so asking yourself, is there someone else that fits better? And just taking that as an opportunity to put the things down that rise to the top of the strength list, will reset a bit.
Well, and I can imagine that trouble gives you some bright insights. Are there 2 or 3 things you can share that you're seeing things moving in a positive direction? And I certainly know the work that's going on in DEI is moving a needle. Are there some things like that or other that you see that, let's give some people hope?
Yeah. Well, I think, you mentioned my current chapter includes working on Trouble and working on a number of boards. And that's a relatively new chapter for me. I moved out of a full-time operating role in March of 2020, which just happened to be a coincidence with COVID timing, but it was something I knew that was going to be occurring because of a change of structure in my current company back 6 months prior to that. So I was planning for what was next and thought about a portfolio of boards. And so then I needed to see if that was something that was feasible, and started to look for opportunities. And I think my personal experience reflects a lot of good change that's going on, which is there is a very intentional effort among many companies to have a more diverse group representing the company on their board. And the rooms that I sit in look very different than they looked 20 years ago. There are different corporate backgrounds that are involved. It used to be true that in order to be on a board, really you needed to be someone who had come from a CEO role, and that was the profile of most board members. But the world is so much more complicated, and there's a lot of important areas of expertise, subject matter expertise, to bring to a company to win. And so recognition around all of the areas, climate, changes in supply chain and the importance of that, the importance of financing and finance expertise, marketing, and, all of the disruption that's gone on in that world. So there's lots of different folks that are in the room today compared to the past with different subject matter domains.
Yeah.
And then there are, of course, classic differences as it relates to markers for diversity, gender, age, race, that make that set of people so much more rich today. And all of the stats show progress on that in those classic dimensions. And I think that is a really positive move that has occurred because of an appreciation for real solid data that shows that when you have a more diverse team, you put out better business results. And so that's not questionable. And the hard work is actually making sure that we identify diverse slates of people and take the time to recruit folks so that we've got a broad set, because there are many qualified people out there of all different types, but we all tend to want to do things quickly, and we end up tapping into the networks we know, and that restricts access to lots of folks who would be better than the people that we choose if we took the time to identify them and include them in the search process.
No, that's excellent to hear. And I think, the work I do in innovation when I'm working with our customers, we're always working to help diversify the skill sets, and that skill sets also means diversify the thinking and the people, because you get different think, and it really is so important. So it's good to hear, more is happening at all areas of the companies, the board level and in staffing. So I think that's wonderful and good news. More needs to be done. We all know that.
Well, I also think there's an appreciation today, at least in the rooms that I'm in, for people to speak up about those perspectives that are
that's
different.
good to hear.
Yeah. And I think the recognition that groupthink can get companies and in situations can go in the wrong direction.
Right.
There are many vivid examples of that. So those situations, I think, open a window for for the voice to be heard around, kind of a dissenting view. And it may end up not changing the decision, but the consideration process is much richer. And of course, in many cases, there's something that the group was not thinking about that was very critical and can change the course of where things go.
That's very good to hear too. That's wonderful. So talk a little bit more about Trouble and what would you want? How do people access Trouble for Good? I know you're on Instagram, and we'll share a lot of these links and when we do the write-up intro for you. But can you share a little bit more about Trouble and how people access it or get involved in it?
Of course. So Trouble is a place where we can all honor and recognize troublemakers. As I said, those are courageous disruptors that make good things happen. And one of the situations that I think many of us can relate to is a moment where you get a note, an email, a call from someone that thanks you for something that you did that really helped them in a tough situation that they had. And I, in my workplaces, I always had an email file called my happy file and a drawer where those note cards went. And I cherish those, and I love writing them and giving them to other people who obviously, there have been many that have been so helpful to me and in important moments. So Trouble is a place where we can all honor and recognize folks who we view as helping us, helping the world. It can also be a place where you honor and recognize someone for an award, for a birthday, an anniversary, a milestone. And just like we write those notes, you can write personalized notes. You go to TroubleMakers.org. You can buy a gift for that person that is a tangible thing, like a hat or a bag or a scarf or a candle, and write a personalized note. We have a place where you can do that on the site. We handwrite those notes. We send them, I send a gift to you, Teresa, to thank you for this opportunity on the interview. And then 100% of the profits from those purchases, from those honors, go to our trouble giving partners. And so we have different partners each quarter. Right now, all of our partners are nonprofit organizations that are in the space of fighting the fight, working hard every day to close gender equity gaps. And so today they are Girls Who Code, the Last Mile Education Fund, and the ERA Foundation. And so we are creating a movement, a community of people that are all about calling out the people around us that are lifting us up, and we have a chance to lift each other up in sending those notes and giving those gifts. And then every time you put on your trouble pin or your trouble hat, you remember that Teresa honored you, and all of the organizations that are doing the hard work are benefiting as part of the broader trouble community. So you can go to TroubleMakers.org on the web, where, as you said, we're on Instagram as TroubleMakers for Good, and Facebook, TroubleMakers for Good. We're on LinkedIn as Trouble, and also on Twitter, Trouble for Good.
That's awesome. Where do you hope to take this?
Oh, well, we launched Trouble on the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, which we all know that was back in August of 2020. And the 19th Amendment was, as we know, meant to give all women the right to vote. And it's a perfect example of a step forward, but it also came along with steps back, because it did not give all women the right to vote. It gave white privileged women the right to vote, but poor women, women of color, many women were not able to vote. It was only later through the Voters' Rights Act in the 60s, and John Lewis and others who pushed forward on broadening equity for voting, a fundamental right, that all women were given and granted the right to vote. So our moonshot goal is launching on the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment to give $100 million to organizations that are fighting the fight. And there are so many organizations doing incredible work. And like any sector, if they have more resources available to them, they can accelerate the work they're doing. And that's the role that TroubleMakers play. They're unlocking the value that that organizations could get to, but they can get to it sooner if we're able to give them more support, money, and resources to help them do the work that they're doing.
It's so uplifting to hear. I think is when I honor you for taking on Trouble and really doing good things with this. I guess, would you have any last parting words of inspiration for especially those seeking maybe a board seat or a CEO role? How maybe to embody, what tips would you give them to move forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of my favorites that were, of course, I'm paying it forward from advice that I was giving, or spreading the wisdom that I've benefited from. One of the mentors that I had in one of my corporate jobs, I was discussing, an opportunity that was available in the company. And this person said to me, Bari, don't wait for someone to pass the ball to you. Go take it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's true for many folks. We put our heads down, we work hard, and we deliver results, and we think that, you know, that's going to do it. But the reality is that people need to know that you're interested in the next role. And sure, it takes some courage to raise your hand because
Sure.
you might not get it, but you're certainly, you know, I think it's,
Putting
I'm not
yourself
good
forward.
on, yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm trying, I think it's Wayne Gretzky, but I'm not great with sports quotes, but I think it's 100% of the shots you don't take,
Yeah.
you never make it to the goal, something like that.
Yeah.
I think he'd be upset if he heard the way that I said his quote, but anyway, the spirit of it is that. So take the shot.
Yeah.
And if you take the shot and you don't make it, it's clearly
Take
better
another shot.
than
Right.
no shot at all. So that's for me, that's been, there have been moments where I've said, oh, yeah, take the
Yeah.
shot. Remember that advice. So that's one of the main messages that I would want to share
Yeah.
with other folks. Raise your hand, take the shot, and you know, put yourself out there and look what comes back to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Bear, you're a wonderful troublemaker. Love talking to you and really do appreciate your time. And we'll make sure people have links and everything to be able to connect with you and Trouble as well. So thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Well, it's been a pleasure on my end too. Thanks so much. It's been fun and I appreciate you having me.
You're welcome. Thank you.